Whether you operate one forklift or thousands, one location or hundreds, the new My Toyota customer portal can help you optimize your operation and material handling equipment. This one-stop, free-to-use platform is designed to help you take control of your information and make smarter decisions, all at the touch of a button. Register and access your data today at my.toyotaforklift.com. That's my.toyotaforklift.com.
Does your warehouse waste time and money managing forklift batteries? Enersys can energize your operations with a customized solution, delivering the power you need while minimizing ownership costs. Enersys starts by analyzing your operations and then selecting from their comprehensive range of battery and charger technologies, develops a truly optimized system tailored to your needs. Enersys gives you the power to increase productivity and profitability. See how Enersys puts power in motion for you at enersys.com. Businesses are retooling fulfillment operations, from warehouses to omnichannel, to meet new demand amid unprecedented labor shortages. 3PLs, retailers, B2B distributors, and others are turning to flexible fulfillment solutions like 6 River Systems to adapt and scale. 6 River Systems Fulfillment Execution System is an integrated solution that combines intelligent, cloud-based software and automation, including its autonomous mobile robot, AMR, Chuck. No costly or disruptive infrastructure changes, fast and easy associate training, and integrations with other warehouse execution solutions allow operations to meet labor challenges, increase efficiency, and enhance customer engagement. Go to www.6river.com to learn more. Go to www.6river.com to learn more.
The New Warehouse Podcast, hosted by Kevin Lawton, is your source for insights and ideas from the distribution, transportation, and logistics industry. A new episode every Monday morning brings you the latest from industry experts and thought leaders. And now, here's Kevin.
Hey, it's Kevin Lawton with the New Warehouse Podcast, bringing you a new episode today. On today's episode, I am going to be joined by Learie Hercules, also known as Herc, and he is the CTO at Smart Warehousing. And Smart Warehousing is bringing you warehousing in a smarter way, I think, right? But Herc's going to tell us a little bit more about that and what it is that Smart Warehousing does, and we're going to dive into a little bit more on the technical side of warehousing and, how automation and some things like predictive analytics, as well as cloud-based storage, is going to have an impact on warehousing in the future and having an impact already. So, Herc, welcome to the show. How are you, sir?
I'm good. Thank you for having me, Kevin.
Definitely happy to have you on. Happy to connect with you and talk about this. So give us a little bit of information, I guess, on Smart Warehousing and what it is that you guys actually do.
Sure. So Smart Warehousing history started with the need for warehouse space and product delivery.
Right.
Hence the name Smart Warehousing. But just as in any other industry, the words evolved over time. And so if we think about Uber is not a taxi company.
Right.
Even though they move people from A to B, it's really a logistics company moving people.
Mm-hmm.
And so when you think about warehousing, traditionally, it's all about centralizing product and moving it to where it's ordered.
Mm-hmm.
Really, the domain has changed into becoming one of a logistics domain.
Mm.
So even though the name Smart Warehousing still persists, what we literally do, it's no different than DoorDash or Uber. Mm. Uber moves people from A to B, DoorDash moves food from A to B, and we move packages from A to B.
Right.
And so when you take a look at the domain, the type of problems that exist is very similar in nature in terms of logistics and how we leverage big data infrastructure and how we leverage machine learning. Right? So when you take a look at traditional supply chain industry, really much grew up around building warehouse management systems to manage the operations of a warehouse.
Okay.
And today, these domains and logistics companies now becoming full logistics company, where we are now taking a look at our distribution of warehouses as a network of warehouses, and how do we optimize moving product from A to B in a way that reduces our carbon footprint, gets us the last mile delivery, and gets product delivered in 1 to 2 days.
Very interesting. And I think it's, it's an interesting point that you made there. I mean, the comparison between, Uber, DoorDash and what you guys are doing with smart warehousing. I mean, at the end of the day, everything essentially is equated to, a box, right? A box is a box. We got to get it from somewhere to somewhere else, right? And even though that seems very simple in the aspect of just saying it, there's a lot that goes into making that happen, right? So I think, at Smart Warehousing, you guys are addressing some of these things from a technical standpoint, and you as the CTO, you're the technical guy, right? So that's in your title there. So talk to us a little bit about first, I guess, your background and how you kind of got to smart warehousing in the position you are now.
Sure. So I started in telecom. My mom worked in R&D telecom, so I always had an interest in telecom and communication networks. And so I started off doing a radio frequency design of cellular networks. The cell phone being the first IoT device at scale,
right,
if you think about it like that, right? And being able to optimize the mobility of this device across networks and towers and cities. And then the volume of data that this device generated, having to deal with data at scale and building technologies to process that data at scale in real time and make it actionable, right? And so it was a natural fit for me moving to Silicon Valley in 2011, really started my own tech startup to measure and quantify cellular network connectivity and mesh networking, etc. And then moving into AT&T Big Data, where, again, if you think about a subscriber base of 130 million devices, spewing data every single second of the day,
that's a lot of
capturing
data.
That data and processing that, So we are very early in the big data evolution, starting off doing a lot of Hadoop and Hadoop clusters, and then Apache Spark coming out of Berkeley, and really building Apache Spark processing engines, and really being first to machine learning as well, and having to build the infrastructure to capture the data, process the data, and then do the machine learning, and then set up the governance structure around data. Who owns the data, privacy, compliance, security, and all that. So it was a very exciting time, learned a lot, right place, right time. And then really moved out of the valley into what I call the real economy, where industries had a gap in thinking about the space they were in, and the role of data as a product as well. And so I've been in smart cities, in EdTech, and now in supply chain, where supply chain touches every single sector of the economy. And it's this ripe ecosystem of people, consumer demand, marketing tech on the e-com platforms, retail platforms like the Target and the Walmart, and then the physical, offline, online, where we have product, people in the warehouse optimizing how they work, and then the robotics, very IoT driven as well. And so it's just this confluence of the set of tech frameworks that can now live together, coexist, and really drive some disruptive things in the space.
Very interesting, and very interesting evolution in your career there to get to where you are now in the supply chain space. And I love that you said that supply chain touches pretty much every part of the industry, which is very true. And it's interesting because a lot of times I teach too, and there's some students and they're like, well, what is supply chain? And they're like, is this supply chain? I'm like, well, yeah, that's supply chain. What about this? Oh, yeah, that's supply chain too. Yeah, what about this? This is supply chain too. So it really is like everything, right? So I'm curious though, as you were going through this big data and the kind of the growth of big data and almost like you mentioned, the big data becoming a product in a sense. What drew you towards the supply chain arena? Like what really attracted you from the previous telecom experience and stuff like that to supply chain itself?
I've been studying the space since 2019, and I've seen the deep tech Silicon Valley funded companies trying to get into the space, and I've seen the incumbents trying to make a technology pivot. And it's two very different worlds.
Yeah,
right?
absolutely.
So you have the VC funded startups, and that world I lived in for 6.5 years, where you try to use lean startup principles, understand the product, the problem domain, get the problem solution fit, and then you come into the real world, and it's very difficult to get the traction you need or understand how you deploy technology into these type of domains. And then on the incumbent side, I'm taking a view of innovation as very incremental, and what can we do using small steps? And so there's this collision course that is set up between venture-funded startups and supply chain and the incumbents trying to make a technology change. And it's, okay, how quickly do both sides move to get to that point to understand who's going to disrupt who? Yeah. And so a big part for me was the executive team as well that I met, who understood deep tech as well and the impacts of deep tech and had still the entrepreneurial DNA. So our founder is still the CEO to actually make the radical innovative steps that we need versus taking it incrementally. And that is what helps companies like Smart Warehouses really win in the marketplace, the temperament of the executive team to drive radical innovation in the space.
Interesting. Yeah. I love that you touched on the differences of the two worlds, because I think it is very much, we look at the warehousing industry in itself is, we could say in a way, is very old school, right? There's a lot of people that have, been in the industry for a long time, and, there's a lot of, mindset too of, well, this is the way we've done warehousing for, forever, and it's worked. So why do we need to bring in all this tech and things like that, right? And then you have, like you said, the startups that are coming in and they want to get in space. And, I think what we're seeing in a lot of aspects is a lot of robotics and AI applications. Actually, some of the most initial practical uses of that technology are in the warehousing and material handling sector. So it's interesting that you pointed that out. And I'm curious, as you've been kind of studying this and figuring this out, I mean, what do you think is sort of the tipping point in a sense where, we let go of this old school mindset of warehousing and start to really, in the OGs, we could say, of the warehousing, right? How do we get them to kind of, get on board with, this technology is here to stay. And, this is really kind of the way that warehousing is going to be able to work into the future.
I think it's two parts. It's one, having the technical knowledge at the executive level to really push the organization as a business. And, secondly, the ability to attract the talent you need to make the pivot. If you think about what it calls warehousing, it's very difficult to use the word warehousing and attract the talent you need.
Right.
Unless you have someone at the executive position can reposition what you're doing as a business. Very difficult. Yeah. Right? And so even though there's a lot of robotic technologies being introduced into the space, but again, it's still a local minima. You're operating within the four walls with robots. It's still not too attractive for certain types of talent, right? And it works really well within a direct-to-consumer DTC space, small packages, high volume, high turnaround, and you have robots assisting humans and executing on that model. But as brands start scaling their D2Cs, they need to get into the big retailers, the Walmarts and the Targets of the world.
Right.
And a lot of the logistics companies don't have the capability to fulfill retail. And so a lot of brands, when they start growing up, they come to us because we can do both direct to consumer and retail. And so that kind of differentiates us. It also allows us to understand what technologies the retailers themselves are introducing and how they are approaching the market. So, for example, we have 38 warehouses within our network, but we take a network view of logistics.
Okay.
If you think about what the data center did to the server, it allowed you to not worry about the server because you had a data center. So it virtualized capacity across all of the servers. And what we've done is we've virtualized our capacity across all of the warehouse footprint.
Okay.
And not just capacity, the movement of the good. And so we can place products closer to your users because we do have demand forecasting models that helps these brands get their product closer at a cheaper price point to their customers. And so we took a network optimization view of the business versus a warehouse view of the business.
Interesting.
And that has unlocked a lot of value for us because, one, the architecture that exists is now able to scale up. You take a look at logistics companies in the past, their operations would be focused around the database. Versus today, we leverage our data lake. And big data infrastructure. If you hear about technologies like Apache Spark, we have real-time processing engine, real-time machine learning engines. It's very much Silicon Valley within the space.
With e-commerce off the charts, many small and growing warehouses are asking, how can I get ahead when my warehouse is barely keeping up? The answer is future-ready warehouse tech from Zebra Technologies. Warehouses can simplify and upgrade all processes, from automated inventory management to hands-free picking, with Zebra's tailored, scalable mobile solutions. They're simple and intuitive. There's never been a better time to upgrade for success with Zebra. How can your warehouse get ahead? The answer's in black and white. Get the answers at zebra.com/theanswer. That's zebra.com/theanswer.
Interesting. So I love the idea that you're talking about this network approach, and obviously it's pretty interesting because that kind of calls back to your beginning of your career, right? You were working networking in telecom,
networks,
right? So along with that too, you're talking about this machine learning, and through that comes these kind of predictive analytics, right? As the machine learning is being able to start to understand and decipher patterns in the forecasting and what kind of market factors are going to react to what, and then I'm sure helps you with that positioning of the inventory. But when we look at things like most recently the biggest thing out there, right, the pandemic. I mean, when you see things like this, or even like small things where maybe there's a highway gets shut down or something like that, or there's a trucking issue. You have these either large scale or small scale kind of supply chain crises in a sense, right? How does taking these like predictive analytics and machine learning approaches, how does that help you better to navigate these issues and still stay on track with your customers?
Sure. Yeah. So if you take a look at the retailers today, they're moving away from a centralized distribution model. Right. So typically they would do a hub and spoke distribution. But if one path gets jammed, it's very difficult to reposition the product or ship it from another location. What we have done, we've used a distributed model, right, where we distribute the product into zones based on demand. And if there's a storm in one location, we can fulfill it out of another location. We're also building a network of local carriers. Right. So you look at the large carriers, they do a lot of regional moves and then local moves. And so by repositioning the product and taking a look at the landed costs for the product in terms of storage, last mile delivery location, and local carrier, we're able to get the product and move the product and become a more resilient supply chain provider.
Interesting. So now I guess my question there is, as you look at this more distributed inventory in a sense, right, spreading it out instead of having it at a hub, do you end up investing more in inventory in order to have it available in more locations and have it more spread out? Or do you end up being more smarter and tighter on your inventory in a sense because it's in the right positioning?
Yeah, actually tighter. What's happening is the brands are growing. Some brands are growing so fast.
Mm-hmm.
One, they don't have the ability to attract the technical talent to do machine learning and forecasting. Right? Some of them use a lot of spreadsheets and Power BI and try to figure it out.
Yeah.
And from looking into the data when I first started, I noticed customers and brands would swag where they need to be positioned in terms of product. And so I was seeing products being fulfilled from California but going to the East Coast. Right? And so very quickly I understood that there was a potential for optimization that saves the brands a lot of money, and also decreases their inventory footprint.
Interesting. So is it? Yeah, I mean, I think it's a great idea because you have the idea, and I guess there's always that just the human mindset of like if I have multiple locations, like, well, I need to have more inventory, right? Because I need to make sure I don't run out of stock like on the West Coast and when I have stock on the East Coast. So the fact that you're able to kind of take the machine learning and the technology and be able to optimize that as best as possible, I think is really a great thing. And, for like in that sense, I mean, when you bring on a new customer, I mean, what is kind of what would you call it? I guess even like the learning curve in a sense for the customer, or like what is that initial hump kind of like to get to that full optimization of the inventory?
Yeah, so we have a whole smart replenishment program where we take 13 months of your order history.
Okay.
And then we run the forecast models. We bill per SKU. So you bring your product in, the lowest landing location, and we take care of all of the rest.
Okay. So
we make it like super easy for the brands to keep focusing on growing their brand.
Oh, interesting. So I love that because it's not, you're not necessarily. So basically, you're kind of doing the forecasting and the planning for them in terms of where it needs to be, where the inventory needs to be. Okay.
Yes. If you think about Amazon, brands send product into Amazon. Amazon does the rest.
Right. Yeah.
But today, the same technology exists for companies like ours to leverage the same big data infrastructure to do what Amazon did.
Interesting. Yeah. I think that makes a lot of sense. I mean, it shows the value of having a partner like Smart Warehousing for a brand, obviously. So, when we talk about all this stuff, obviously, back to the beginning of the conversation, we're talking about big data, and data really is what is driving all of this and making all of this possible. And I think one thing, I mean, for sure is we generate all this data, but then how do we actually use the data, right? We can have all this data just sitting and missing tons of opportunities, but you guys are able to take that data and make these great decisions and be able to optimize it, as you mentioned. So with that being said, obviously the data itself needs to be stored somewhere, right? And our systems need to be either on a server traditionally or something like that. But what we're seeing is a lot of move to cloud-based storage, and we talk about that, and obviously we talk about the cloud, and all this stuff is up in the sky, right, or wherever it is. So in regards to warehousing itself, how is cloud-based storage, I guess, being utilized within warehousing now, and how is it going to help the future of warehousing in general?
Sure. So we've created an entire event-driven architecture. If you think about the database, that was the center of warehouse management systems and a lot of other systems. It's very transactional and very state. So if I have 100 apples at the beginning of the day, and at the end of the day I have 10 apples, I know I've sold 90 apples today. If I'm trying to figure out what hour did I sell the most apples? I won't be able to answer that question.
Yeah.
Right? Because the database is not storing the events.
Okay.
It's storing the last state.
Yeah.
And so what we've done, we've created an architecture where we save every single event as a timestamp. So now you have a time series of events across every single event that takes place in a warehouse. It means I can now answer questions, what was my busy hour, right?
Yeah.
And what was my busiest hours per day for the last 90 days? So those are very different questions that can be answered using a mechanism where you store events. Right? So the industry has grown up with databases, doing daily dumps of last status and doing BI reports.
Right.
So you're looking backwards continually, but daily. Versus now you have this timestamp stream of data that you can process in real time and forecast performance before the day ends.
We'll be back after a quick break.
You hear a lot about supply chains these days, because if the past couple years have taught us anything, it's that an efficient, well-managed supply chain is absolutely critical to keeping businesses successful and consumers happy. I'm Will Haywood, and I host a podcast called All Business, No Boundaries, where we talk about supply chains, how they work, what happens when they don't, and the innovations that are redefining what's possible in the world of logistics. Join me for insightful interviews with thought leaders and industry experts. We discuss how optimizing supply chains can break down the barriers that are holding businesses back. That's All Business, No Boundaries by DHL Supply Chain. Listen and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts.
Interesting. So, yeah, I mean, it's certainly more advantageous to see all of that timestamp data, and from my experience, being able to look at the data and seeing stuff that's like, a week old is sometimes it's, what's even the point at looking at it at this point, right? So, and especially in warehousing, I mean, things move so quickly, right? So, you need to make decisions now instead of, root causing for something that was an issue 2 weeks ago. And now we have a new issue that we're not going to get to for another 2 weeks. So, it makes definitely perfect sense. So I mean, I guess in that sense, what you're saying is, looking at the traditional database model, not able to necessarily house that much data as we would with like a cloud-based solution. Is that correct?
Yes, volume, right? So volume problem, as well as because databases were expensive, you'd pay a database license, and how much disk storage was expensive. To store 1 gig per month of data now costs 0.002 cents. Right? So there's no need to throw away any data. Right? And so to process it used to be a problem as well, the processing power needed. So now we have frameworks like Apache Spark to do large scale processing. Storage formats has evolved. So there's a format called Parquet that's very efficient in compression. And then you have a lot of big data tools that run on these Parquet formatted data. So now the size, the speed, the velocity of the data is not a problem either. So there's frameworks like Apache Kafka. We use Kinesis data streams on Amazon to process high volume data at scale, right? To query data, you would need a DBA writing queries on a relational database. Today, there's a NoSQL databases. And with that design, you actually write the query on large scale data, 100 million records. It'll come back sub-second. Right? Yeah. So the BI frameworks are changing as well. The big BI vendors like Power BI and the Tableau, there's a whole rise of BI vendors and a whole rise of a category of headless BI, which says disconnect the visualization piece from the query engines and from the data storage and optimize each layer. So the BI vendors are being disrupted as well. Right? So, so from the collection of the data at high speed to the cleaning, data quality and the wrangling and the ETL, to the processing of it, to the storage formats, and then to the machine learning, and then the governance of it, security and privacy by design, PII data being collected, as well as security, zero trust architectures. So it's a very different landscape we're building that traditionally exists, and it's already started to unlock whole new revenue models as well for us in terms of creating visibility platforms, because we do have the capability to ingest data from any source at high speed and process it in sub-seconds.
Very interesting. So, and it's actually changing a little bit of the business offerings you're having.
Yes.
So, I mean, in that sense, I guess, a question, do you guys kind of position yourself or picture yourself as a warehousing company or a tech company at this point?
Actually, we're like a data warehousing company now, right? It's all about the data platform and using the data to optimize the service side of the business, as well as provide additional value to the marketplace.
Wow, that's a really different kind of approach, I think. But it makes sense, in this day and time, and obviously with everything going on. So with that being said, obviously, focused on a lot of the technology in the space, and with your background too, in the startup space, I'm curious to know from your perspective, as we look at the material handling, warehousing industry, there's obviously a lot of discussion around automation and robotics, but what do you think is like the next biggest thing from a technology standpoint in material handling and warehousing?
The move to micro fulfillment. I think we think about a warehouse as a location we put product. Right. So a trailer comes into a dock door, you offload the product. Yeah. Order comes in, you load it back to a trailer. I think we're going to see some mobility around a micro fulfillment piece. And there's a couple of things we're working on as well that I can't speak to right now. But I would say micro fulfillment mobility.
Interesting. So I guess, and I'm very interested in the micro fulfillment space myself. And so, I mean, from that perspective, I mean, are you seeing that, when we look at micro fulfillment, we're looking at the idea of just taking, maybe like a traditional, what would be a retail space, and making that into a small fulfillment center? Or are we looking at, potentially thinking that, we're creating these smaller spaces that are like fully automated within like in a more like densely populated area or something of that nature?
But both, as well as mobile.
As well as mobile. So when you say mobile, I mean, it's like on. I mean,
I can't give away
know
too much.
How much you can say, right?
Too much, but mobile.
Okay. That'll be the next podcast episode. We'll talk about that. Okay. All right. Gotcha. Okay. All right. So, I mean, very interesting stuff. And, I think, it's incredibly interesting to see, I think from your personal perspective, how you've kind of taken this knowledge from telecom and networking and big data, and then taking this and applied it to it in this warehousing field and sector, and actually taken, what would be necessarily a traditional kind of like 3PL model and made it into like a tech data company, like as you mentioned. I think it's pretty incredible to see, and I think it makes total sense for the way that the industry is moving and heading. I think a lot of other people probably is going to have to catch up to you guys a little bit. So really interesting stuff from you, Herc, and I really appreciate you coming on the show to talk about this, and it's incredibly insightful.
Appreciate being here.
Definitely. Being here. So if people are interested in learning more about smart warehousing, how can they do that?
smartwarehousing.com. Take a look at our careers page. It'll give you kind of a little insights into what we're working on, a little bit of the secret sauce, and then we're going to follow us on LinkedIn as well. Okay. And Twitter, and then we are going to make a couple of announcements in the next couple of months as well.
All right, great. And we'll put all the information at thenewwarehouse.com. And then, we'll be looking forward to those announcements, and, hopefully we'll be talking about some of them on the podcast in the future. So, Herc, thank you very much for coming on the show again.
You've been listening to the New Warehouse Podcast with Kevin Lawton. Subscribe and check us out online at thenewwarehouse.com.
Thank you for listening to this episode. If you want more content from the New Warehouse, check out our new video series called All Hands on LinkedIn. Just search for the New Warehouse on LinkedIn and follow along.